Hello, everyone. Today's sermon is on Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. And it starts Jeremiah, I am your creator. And before you were born, I chose you to speak for me to the nations. I replied, I am not a good speaker, Lord, and I am too young. Don't say you're too young. The Lord answered, if I tell you to go and speak to someone, then go. And when I tell you what to say, don't leave out a word. I promise to be with you and keep you safe. So don't be afraid. So I want to tell you a quick story about Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a young man when God called him. God came to Jeremiah and essentially told him, before you were even born, I already knew you. I already chose you, and I have a purpose for your life. But Jeremiah immediately looked at himself. Instead of looking at what God who called him, Jeremiah looked at what he thought was missing in him. He said, I am not a good speaker. I am too young. And I think a lot of us can relate to Jeremiah. God may God may be calling us to do something, but the first thing we notice is everything we think disqualifies us. God, I'm not confident enough. God, I'm not enough. God, I don't have enough experience. I'm not educated enough. I don't have the resources. I'm not a good speaker. There are people who can do this better than me. These are the excuses that we tell ourselves when we are called to do something or when the Lord tells us to do something. But what I love about this story is that God never argued with Jeremiah about his ability. God didn't say, Jeremiah, actually, you are an amazing speaker. Instead, God shifted Jeremiah's attention away from himself. God basically told him, go where I send you. Say what I tell you to say. Don't be afraid because I am with you. And that changes everything. Because sometimes God is not trying to prove to us that we are strong enough. He is trying to teach us that He is strong enough. Sometimes we keep asking God to remove our weaknesses while God is saying, I can use you right there. Think about Jeremiah. The very thing he felt inadequate in was connected to the very thing God called him to do. He said, I can't speak. God said, I'm sending you to speak. This is very powerful because sometimes the area where you feel the weakest may become the very place where you experience God the strongest. Maybe you're afraid to speak in front of people and God calls you to speak. Maybe you're afraid to sing. Maybe you're afraid to start that business. Maybe you're afraid to, do something that the Lord has called you to do for a very long time. Everybody has their fears. Everybody has this challenge or this mountain that they've created, um, this perception that they've created in their heads. Maybe you feel like you don't have enough. Maybe you don't feel like you have enough funds for a business you want to start. And God places you in a position where people begin coming to you for wisdom. Maybe you have been struggling with confidence and God puts you somewhere that requires you to stand boldly. And we think, God, why would you choose me for something I don't feel equipped to do? And it's because if he could do everything completely in our own strength, we might never learn how much we need him. Sometimes God will allow the assignment to be bigger than our ability so that we learn dependence on him. And have you ever noticed that it's always the things that you're so much afraid to do, that you're so much afraid to, tackle is what God sometimes, most of the time, I think, calls us to do. For example, I have a fear of speaking in front of people. I've always been like that since I was a kid, and I would avoid it, and I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, what if I say the wrong thing? Or, what if people are laughing at me? Like, I'm thinking of the worst case scenario. I'm literally creating a story in my head. And another thing is God has been calling me to sing, in front of the choir, and I always find a reason not to do it. So many things God has called me to do, but because of fear of the worst, I don't end up doing it. And these are things I believe our purpose is. And sometimes in our weaknesses, God truly wants us to depend on him. You know, and I believe that's why he calls us, because he knows in those areas where we can depend on him. Um, Sometimes God will allow the assignment to be bigger than our abilities so that we can learn dependence on him. Jeremiah's confidence could not come from his age. It could not come from his experience. It could not even come from his speaking ability. His confidence had to come from one thing: God was with him. And I believe that this is something we need to remember. When God calls you, he already knows your weaknesses. He knew Jeremiah was young before he called him. He knew Jeremiah felt inadequate before he called him. So Jeremiah's weaknesses was not new information to God, and neither is ours. Another good example is Moses, when God called him to go to Egypt and speak to Pharaoh and bring the people, his people out of Egypt. Moses said he can't speak. I believe from what I remember, he's a stammerer. He had speech issues, and he still did it, right? And I believe his brother Aaron, from what I can recall, he used his brother Aaron to speak for him. So even when God calls us to do something that is challenging, always remember he's always with you no matter what the situation is. And he's not going to leave you alone. He's never left me alone, even situations that I thought that I couldn't make come out of it. So that's so important. So Jeremiah's weaknesses was not new information to God, and neither is ours. God knows the areas where we struggle. He knows the things we are afraid of. He knows where we feel inadequate, yet he can still say, I choose you. And maybe the question isn't always, I am capable enough. Maybe the better question is, did God call me? Because if God called me, then I don't have to manufacture strength that I don't have. I can obey him one step at a time and trust him to supply what I need. And over time, something beautiful happens. The place that once made me afraid or made us afraid becomes a place where our faith grows. The thing that we once said, I can't do this, because the testimony where we say, look at what God did through me. So today, don't automatically reject something because you feel inadequate. Don't automatically assume your weakness disqualifies you. Jeremiah saw weaknesses, but God saw a vessel. Jeremiah saw his age. God saw his purpose. Jeremiah saw what he couldn't do. God saw what he could do through Jeremiah. And God can do the same thing with us. Our weakness does not have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it becomes the very place where God teaches us to depend on him, strengthen us, develop us, and ultimately uses us for his purpose. So when God says go, you should go. And when God says speak, you should speak. When God gives you an assignment, what makes you feel inadequate, don't just look at yourself. Remember who is going with you. Jehovah is going with you. Because the greatest promise God gave Jeremiah wasn't that Jeremiah would suddenly become perfect. It was simply, I am with you. And sometimes knowing God is with you is all the confidence you need to take the next steps. And so I have 7 prayer points that I believe you can pray on. And the first prayer point is, Father, remove every spirit of fear from my heart. The second prayer point is, Lord, help me to stop focusing on my weaknesses and inadequacies. The third is, Father, use the area where I feel weak for your purpose. The fourth prayer is, Lord, strengthen me in every area where I feel inadequate. The fifth is, Father, deliver me from comparing myself to other people. The sixth is, Lord, give me the grace to say yes to you, even when I feel unqualified. And the last prayer is, Father, turn my weaknesses into testimonies of your strength. And I hope you can pray these prayers. And I pray that this short sermon was able to make an impact in your life. And I pray that the Holy Spirit will continue to guide us, intervene for us. And I pray that Jesus Christ will continue to, teach us his ways and transform our minds and give us strength, perfect us in his ways, and continue to love us. Have a great day. Bye.